Hi, everyone. Good evening. Carl Steinbeck here. Saturday night here in New York City. And sorry, I had to cancel an earlier announcement because I had some technical issues that had to get tweaked out on, and that really had to do with the slides. My last live stream had the start of doubts 1 through 20, and tonight I'm going to cover doubts 21 to 40. So those are reasonable doubts for the Karen Reed case, reasonable doubts that any of which one, just one alone, could defeat a conviction for Karen Reed. So there only has to be one, and yet there's could easily be 100. So we're going to go through those. These were AI created through a Gronk AI tool that John gave us access to. So that's something that I'm now using to do research. And some of this is not accurate. Keep in mind, AI is not 100% perfect. So what I was doing tonight was adjusting and tweaking the slides because 21 to 40, I thought there were some things that were directly not true. So I wanted to make sure that the slides got cleaned up and have a little bit better topic of something to talk about. So they're actually cleaned up and enhanced better than what the AI has generated. So so anyway, this new camera seems to be working really good. So thanks, John, for my brother John for this new camera, and it's working off my MacBook Air here. So now we have a camera that can use here in New York City, and John got me a separate one there that we use in San Antonio. So that's awesome. And thank you, John. With that, I'm going to go ahead and present the layout here. So this is what I covered last time. These are investigation regularities is what AI called it, 1 through 20 on the case. And now what we want to cover tonight here is 21 to 40. So starting out with 21, then we have the autopsy showed no lower body injuries typical of a car strike. So car accidents, they're going to cause a lot of bodily injury. There's supposedly the government's theory that this car was going in reverse roughly 24 miles an hour, and made the strike on John O'Keefe's body, on his arm, the taillight striking his arm, which is really preposterous when you consider the road conditions that night and the lack of any lower body's extremities, because the bumper would even stick out even further than the actual tail light. So keep that in mind. And this SUV is a very much a vertical type of vehicle in the back. It's not like a rounded type vehicle like so many SUVs are. It's not like a jelly bean shape or anything. It's very much a square type vehicle, and with the bumper protruding out. And even looking at the arm, there's no broken bones. So to be actually killed by a motor vehicle and not have any broken bones in your body where it's striking you is it just doesn't make any sense at all. So that alone in and of itself should give rise to reasonable doubts. So if I'm going through here, if you guys want to have any questions, go ahead and I'm trying to stick to the question or the reasonable doubt. So if you have a question about the reasonable doubt, I'll try to loop that in while I'm covering like number 21. So if you have any things on number 21, I'll try to loop that in, because together we're all better eyes. Nobody has a full grip and handle on all the nuanced details. There's so many little different nitnoid details on this case. So sometimes, yeah, I think having us all collectively bring stuff out in the open and jog our memories will help for anybody on the defense team if they do happen to look at this. And I do think they're probably creating their own list as well to focus on a reasonable doubt. And rather than focus on third-party culprit, I think it's really something that is going to be even more resonating with the jury when they look at all these massive failures of the prosecution to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. So with that, if you do have some questions or comments, if you want to put the red emoji question marks, if you can put like a couple at least before you put a question, that way I can right away distinguish that from the chat internally to y'all. And I do appreciate this. This is a very professional following and subscriber pool that we have on this channel. So you guys are very much in tune with just having a professional dialogue, a very intelligent dialogue on the different evidence that is out there on these cases I'm covering. So I appreciate that. So the next one we can jump to is 22. The cause of death listed as head trauma and hypothermia, yet there's no reference to a vehicle impact. This wasn't even something that, as we know, that the uh, Trooper Proctor was very upset when he found out that there wasn't anything referencing to a vehicle impact, and that leads into the next one, 23, which is the manner of death was undetermined. So that's what really got the trooper upset enough to call the medical examiner a whack job, and this definitely is a reasonable doubt right there in and of itself. So when you have the cause of death, a head trauma, and yet you're saying he was struck by the arm from the vehicle, those two things are just not making any sense at all. And then hypothermia, meaning he was out in the cold, laying there for a long time, which had more of a effect on killing him than the other, is still out there as a question mark. And so the bottom line is the way the prosecution is describing the death and the manner of it does not make any sense from the physics standpoint, from kinetic force standpoint. And the medical examiner, despite them trying to feed her information to get her to make this a homicide, could not even rule this a homicide. So the manner of death was undetermined, and that this is the thing that the prosecutor is trying to keep out. So think about that: a prosecutor trying to keep out the manner of death in the autopsy report. Now this this was denied by the judge recently, but this is like a no-brainer. But again, was a data point for me to point out that the only way the prosecution can win this case against Karen Reed is to hide the truth. So the manner of death being undetermined is hiding the truth, because this is the best evidence that there is out there of what actually was the manner of death. And for medical examiners say it's undetermined. There was blunt force trauma to the back of his head. There was numerous injuries to his arm, and those are not consistent with a vehicle strike. And that's why she said it was undetermined. So there's a few more of those data points here and these upcoming points here. And so number 24 is the arm scratches on John O'Keefe were consistent with dog bites, not a car. There's a number of folks that are out there that are experts on dog bites or have experience working with dogs, and they show consistency with those kind of like lateral lines that are parallel to each other, that are consistent with either scratches or the dog's teeth. Those are the kind of things that somebody looking at this are going to think, yeah, this is not from any kind of a back end of a vehicle. And so those kind of scratches are very much also consistent with what we saw for some of the what looked like puncture marks in John O'Keefe's hoodie that he was wearing, and those puncture marks definitely could be consistent with dog bite marks that are on his that are on that arm, and it also could be the claws as well of a dog like a German Shepherd. So that right there is not something that's consistent with the government's theory, and it leads to reasonable doubt. Carrie B, you're saying, but the medical examiner did put in a report that was not from a fight, which is a wild statement to add. He also didn't drown, 100 other things. Yeah, I think that was to say it wasn't a fight because of the back of the head could be from a fight where he falls, he gets shoved. It could be from a fight where he's hit with a plate, some metal piece of object. He's hit with a baseball bat. It looks like it's something more sharp. It doesn't, to me, look like something that's a rounded blunt object like the horn of a car or even a curb type of thing. It looks like it's something more sharp. And so that's why that doesn't make sense why she would say that. But the bottom line is it still is not something that is consistent with a vehicle. It's more consistent with something like a dog bite or an animal bite or attack. All right, so we have Trailgazer, you're saying you've been working at municipal animal shelter for 15 years, dog bites and scratches. So are you saying that that is consistent then? Please clarify that. Leslie's saying, look at my right arm is consistent with a Doberman. I was in the 4th grade. Okay, I'm not familiar with these kind of dog bites, but for those of you that are, I'm hearing that they're very much consistent. So I think that the prosecution is not going to be able to overcome that to say that these are not dog bite injuries. I don't care if they got this expert coming from wherever he is, this Crosby. It doesn't fit common sense. I'm not too worried about him because he's also a longtime police officer. And so I think he's going to be discredited from that on cross-examination. And so he's looking at more from a law enforcement standpoint, maybe unknowingly than somebody who does not work for law enforcement and they're just more of a neutral, detached type expert. Travis James, you're saying maybe a snowplow. Yeah, maybe his arm got rolled up under a snowplow. Maybe the back of his head got hit by a snowplow, that kind of thing. And we just, there's so many different ways he could have died that alone is reasonable doubt, right? So we don't have any cogent, logical, sequential proof of exactly what happened. And if the state can't describe how it happened with any kind of reasonable certainty, or it can be a theory of how somebody died, but there's got to be some kind of facts behind it to support the theory and connect the dots. Here, the dots do not make any sense for the prosecution. The dots make more sense for the defense. Okay, Trailgazer, yeah, you're saying consistent with dog bites and scratches. So I think that's going to be what the jury connects with, and so that right there, I think should be something that is a huge benefit for the Karen Reed defense. Travis James all saying Higgins rehomed his Jeep. Yeah, I don't know what happened with that Jeep if he really held on to it or not. But if you got rid of that Jeep, that would be something that's yeah, similar to the dog. Angie McLaren, you're saying there's no witnesses to know for sure. He definitely wasn't outside when he got his initial injuries. So he definitely was not in the front yard and by the street there. I think that's pretty clear because there's too many people that were near that front yard that were going into the house, that were leaving the house. For example, that Nagel gal that was going out to see her brother, she was going out to talk to them, and they were out there in the right next to the mailbox, and Karen was right ahead of them. So I think that it appears, I think a reasonable jury is going to think that he went into the house. And Travis James, you're saying, I think the defense needs to focus on the timeline. Yeah, I'll get to that here too. The timeline, I think, really hurts them. And like I said previously, they jump around on that. They're not being straight up with the jury, at least in trial one. And based on what they got the witnesses locked in on and what we have for digital forensic type evidence, they're not going to be able to make that jump and recover. All right, so next we have the only DNA found. I use the word found, quote unquote, in those quotations because I think there's reasonable doubts as to whether that was really found there on the SUV. So it's saying here, only DNA found on Karen Reed's SUV was one strand of hair from John O'Keefe. And when you stop to think about the weather conditions, those 12 degrees at the coldest point of that night in the morning when they found him. So 12-degree, bitter cold. So will a piece of hair really stick to a fragment of of any kind of hair like that. So, and then the vehicle's being transported through the windy kind of climate, the cold climate, and that's not going to whip off the vehicle. So, aside from the fact that that's a vehicle that John was riding in all the time, so that's I think that's a huge discount anyway. But I think finding any kind of hair on the outside of the vehicle is just highly suspicious. I see we got the North Carolina trooper here. Sir, if you could describe for us whether you think that piece of hair could have stayed on that vehicle, if anything from John's DNA could stay on that tail broken tail piece and be transported many miles to go to the Canton Sally port. And Cookie Harris, yeah, to have a visual focus on the time will be very beneficial. They need to really drill that down for the jury. I agree. Good points. Okay, officer, here you're asking, can I imagine charging someone with any crime saying it was a motor vehicle crash and no report done? District attorney would never try it. Plus, the lead investigator fired. Yeah, this is something where they didn't want to look for the truth because the truth didn't align with the theory. It seems like. Okay, thank you for responding. It would have not stayed on the vehicle. No way. I just don't believe. I don't believe anything about a hair staying on a vehicle. I doubt you would ever find. I'm trying to think in any road conditions, even if it wasn't rainy, if it wasn't cold, would anybody's hair stay on there? Even if you placed the hair on there, I mean, you'd have to tape the hair on the back of a tailpipe or a tail light in order to have it stay there. Even then, it'd probably blow off. So. Yes, on YouTube, you're saying, I hope they have a better Apple phone X where we can talk specifically about the 3 flights of stairs John O'Keefe recorded. Yeah, so that's one that should be on here as well. This is not on the, that is a forensic evidence one. So yeah, the 3 flights of stairs at 34 Fairview. Definitely, that is like one of the major reasonable doubts on this case. It's like one of the top three, I would say, if not top five. So if they're saying yes, it would have to be taped, would have to and would be blown off. Yeah. So it's it's quite laughable to think that was really John O'Keefe's hair that was stuck on that vehicle the whole time. Yes, Nikki Banks, you're saying they're in a relationship. His DNA would be all over Lexus. I don't think it'd be on the outside of the tail light, though. I really don't think so. And Cookie Harris, you're saying it defies logic and science with the gravitational direction of so much snow melting down on the car. That's another good point. Okay, I'm just trying to. Thomas, you're asking us one of the worst cases you have seen. I would say, that you have to look at more evidence to see that there's reasonable doubt here, and there's even some alibi evidence that really makes it look like Karen could not have done that at all. So, but I've seen. I'm trying to think of one right now. I've seen one that was, yeah. I've seen others that are just like so open and shut, laughable, ridiculous that I really have had against my better judgment. I never tell a client that I guarantee you win your case, but I've had some where I've actually told clients that I guarantee you I'll get this case killed. I'll get it dismissed. If we go to a jury trial, I will get it. I'll get you an acquittal. It's that ridiculous because it's to me overwhelming enough that if I can't get an acquittal on that kind of evidence, then I need to hang it up. So no, this is not the worst I've seen, but in terms of having so much of a botched investigation by so many different law enforcement folks, this is probably the worst I've seen. Law and lit 827. You're saying the police tried to argue that stairs was from the car going up the hill. Yeah, sorry, that isn't going to fly. Okay, here we got one from Jane's World 2. You're saying you disagree on John going to the house. It was dark, snowy. Not surprising that no one saw him outside the yard. Did anyone testify they saw him inside the park? Well, of course they're not going to tell him he didn't go inside to the party if he was there. I mean, if you think about it, if he really was inside that house and the house is owned by a 30-year Boston police detective, do you really think they would want to have that information come out? If something went south in there, and let's just say hypothetically he was beaten in the house, he was knocked out, or let's just say something happened, he fell downstairs, knocked his head, and the dog was starting to attack him, and they didn't want to have that kind of scene going on in the house. They didn't want to have to call 911. And let's just say it was something even worse, where there was a fight that ensued. There was some fight over between Higgins and John. They're pretty much all drunk, and next thing you know, they, do you think all those people are going to want to say what happened and admit it? All it would take is you have numerous law enforcement there to just say nothing happened. He's never was in the house. Drag him outside through the basement door and put him out by the street. I mean, something like that could have happened. So we don't have to prove, if you're the defense, that John went into the house. I'm just telling you, I think most jurors are going to think he went in the house and something happened in the basement. I just think that's a gut instinct most people will have. And so to not see him outside in the yard, at what point, right? He was outside in the yard and no one saw him. That's not possible. He's not even a snowplow driver hours later. So he was not laying in the front yard until many hours later after Karen left. So I think that is what the forensic evidence will show. I think that's what reasonable jurors will conclude. She was already gone by the time he received his injuries. Officer, you're asking me, being that I've been an attorney for a long time, can you name one thing the law enforcement did right? Well, boy, I guess I got John O'Keefe's name right, and but I can't really think of anything they did that comports with traditional investigation techniques. And I mean, everything, the way they didn't interview the right people, they didn't separate them, they didn't have deconflicted investigators handling this case. They didn't have the forensic evidence unit there to properly collect the evidence. So, I mean, you could just go on and on. This thing was a complete disaster from the get-go, an absolute disgrace to John O'Keefe and his family. Hank's lack of grace. You're saying the case is not difficult with cameras on every corner and in everyone's hand. They can't prove what her Twilight looked like before it was seized. So, yeah, there should have been so many opportunities to see other video when the vehicle is being transported, but they never looked. And if you don't look, that kind of evidence will disappear rapidly. So that alone is also reasonable doubt. All right, so let's go on to the next one here. The taillight damage was not consistent. This 26 taillight damage was not consistent with striking a person. If a person was hit by that taillight would not have been shattered into so many pieces. Okay, the body despite it having bone, if you're hitting bone on the person, it's not going to shatter it in so many different pieces. And I think they're going to see, for most of what we had for the ARCA testimony, even when they fired like a shot glass against that, it's not easily breakable. It's not easily breakable into that many pieces unless you have a super blunt, hard object like steel. Like if you're going to hit it with steel, then that's something where you can get maybe that many broken pieces. But those kind of polycarb materials do not break in a lot of small pieces like that unless you use something extremely hardened like steel. So I think that's sort of common sense. James Lynch, I agree with you. I can't believe anything the police say about this case in point. It strains credulity. So I'm totally agree with you. I think for any juror to sit there and listen to this is and believe any of the state's witnesses that are law enforcement, I think they're utterly going to lose it on that point alone. That's why it's vital on jury selection to make sure that jurors understand that law enforcement can come to court, can lie, they can put a spin on facts, they can hide evidence. So I would want to ask more details about law enforcement and their propensity to do things that are completely uh, outright criminal and unconstitutional. And if that's not possible in a juror's mind, then they shouldn't be sitting on this case. So not just whether they're more credible than a non-law enforcement officer as a witness, but do they have other issues where they're going, you know what, the cops are not going to lie on a murder case like this. They have this inherent trust that I want to put onto their testimony. Because think about it, most people don't want to think of law enforcement can be that corrupt, and they could really do something to send an innocent person to jail. But it'll surprise you if you have done many years in law enforcement. You will see, and in the criminal law arena, you'll see you can have people of any walk of life doing something extremely criminal, to include killing people or hiding a body or hiding a crime, telling people to lie about it, to come up with a story that everyone should tell. All that kind of stuff is possible. And so if a juror is going to sit there and think that, well, no, none of that's possible, police officers, they always tell the truth on the witness stand. And that's the kind of person that should be sitting on this jury. So I just hope they get enough of those kind of scrutinizing questions that come before this next jury. Yeah, that's another thing, officer. You're saying, how did his cell phone land underneath him? It was obviously placed there. It's just that could be another forensic bullet on that. So that's something we need to add to the list. Yeah, that's a good one, officer. I appreciate that. F.R. Smith, you're saying at the time where everyone was leaving the party, there was no way that everyone couldn't see something in the yard. I agree, and it wasn't that much snow at that time. Let's see, you're saying he got popped in the face, Chloe reacted, and they didn't want to get sued. Yeah, that could be a very much a juror's conclusion. Violent Lilac, you're saying the defense has two Boston police officers, Brian and Albert, attacked on the witness list. I'm glad they got that kind of stuff because it takes a lot of guts for officers to testify to that, and maybe they are coming there unwillingly because maybe there's some kind of tip that defense counsel received. But I'd say the internal affairs file for Brian Albert as well as Higgins, whatever they have for the ATF, those kind of things need to be disclosed. Thomas T, you're asking, have they watched the whole waterfall video showing how upset Higgins was? That needs to be played out as well and highlighted for the next jury. They definitely need to make that point be driven home. To add it to, you're saying the fact that no police officer want to make sure no one else was dead in the house upon arrival says it all to me. How can anyone? No, no one else was dead inside the house. That's been raised on a number of commenters before. Excuse me. All right, let's see here. JC, you're saying there's been no indication of any trauma to John O'Keefe's body, and it couldn't have hit his head. The physics aren't there. Yeah. So when you combine those, the shape of the vehicle, the supposed speed of the vehicle backing up, and then you look at the trauma to the body, what is lacking there, and just to the head, then yeah, that's definitely an issue for forensics and physics. Does not align with the prosecution's theory. So that's really, if you look at also Trooper Paul, I'll get to Trooper Paul in a minute, but yeah, Trooper Paul, his testimony also proves reasonable doubt as well. Okay, next one we have is the absence of blood or tissue on Karen's SUV. So if this was a vehicle strike on a pedestrian, John O'Keefe, there would be probably some signs of impact, maybe some blood. And the fact is, we don't have that kind of blood or tissue. Did they have any of his DNA other than that supposed hair? Was any markings of his body on there? Any kind of sweat residue or anything like that that would have been recoverable? So I just don't buy anything that they say. I don't care where they came from. I don't care if it was state police. I don't care if it's a lab person. I don't trust a single law enforcement person in the state of Massachusetts that's handled this case. And I'm not disparaging all officers or lab techs, but I'm telling you, the folks that handle this case have many, many issues of credibility that are not going to drive home a conviction for Karen Reed. It's just not going to happen. She's not going to be convicted. All right, next we have the FBI hired experts, ruled out car impact as a cause of death. So think about it, the ARCA witnesses, the one expert talked about how this is not something you're going to see in a body strike by a vehicle. These injuries are not there. And so if you have an expert like ARCA, that's all they do for a living is do accident reconstructions. And you got folks with PhDs in that kind of field with physics and the forensic aspects of it. So that right there tells you something happened other than what the prosecution is telling you happened. So these ARCA witnesses are critical witnesses for the defense. Huge reasonable doubt that this one point alone is enough for a not guilty vote. Okay, the next one, 29. No skid marks or crash evidence at the scene. The morning bodies was discovered. So nowhere did they have any kind of evidence to show exactly how this vehicle of Karen's was driven and this kind of vehicle data that they supposedly came up with Trooper Paul. I don't trust a single thing Trooper Paul says, and I don't think a jury will either. And if they drive home the points of how this guy is not qualified to be an expert, if I was Alan Jackson, I would not refer to him as an expert when I'm cross-examining him. He only has an associate's. He's not used to testifying in murder cases. He's testifying about fender benders. There could be deaths from motor vehicle accidents, but never murder. It's people going the wrong way on a road. It's people spinning out on the ice and crashing in and killing some other drivers. There's a semi-truck rolling over and crushing people. Those are the kind of things that he's investigating, but it's never really subject to that kind of scrutiny where you got someone's life sentence hanging on the line. So he's not going to be credible. The state is not invested in the proper expertise to talk about the what fits their theory. And now to think about it, now the fact that they have Trooper Paul saying that that's what happened, What are they going to find another expert if they want to bolster his testimony that's going to say the same thing Trooper Paul's saying? I submit that there's nobody in America that would ever come up with this kind of story that has any kind of background in accident reconstruction that's tell you the same kind of thing that Trooper Paul did. All right, next we got number 30. Taillight damage on Karen's SUV is vastly different from the time of the towing to the time it's at the Sally port. And keep in mind, there's no photos of her vehicle. As soon as they went to her vehicle and wanted to apprehend it and have the tow truck company take photos, they should have taken photos. If that's the instrumentality of death, that was the so-called weapon used to kill John O'Keefe. They don't even take photographs of it there, and they wait till it gets to Sally Port. It doesn't comport with anything that is done. You need to preserve evidence right away in the condition it's seen at the time law enforcement officers arrive. And that was never done. So because that was never done, and the fact that the condition changed from barely any red missing and any white showing to then having these massive chunks of the taillight missing, that alone is enough to show tampering with the vehicle. And if there's tampering with the vehicle, it begs the question, why was there tampering with the vehicle? And if Karen was guilty, why would anybody have to tamper with a vehicle? So hands down, reasonable doubt, she's not going to be convicted of this murder. Right. So, let's see. Sorry. I'm trying to scroll down here. Oh, that is a current question. Okay. JC, you're asking, there's no indication of trauma to John's mid and lower body. It couldn't have hit his head. The physics, yeah, I think we already covered that one. It's saying it showed up in 1115. But yeah, the physics do not support the prosecution's theory. And they're just doubling down, they're just guessing, and they want to come up with a story that they think best fits, but it's just laughable. It's not even credible. Kim Carson, you're saying the blood has always troubled me, all on John's front. The clothes weren't really focused on. I think the clothes are what is helpful. There's not a lot of blood per se, and then when you look at also the bites, what looks like there could be bites on the hoodie that John was wearing. I think that's reasonable doubt right there. Yeah, the tow truck driver. I'm wondering about the photographs. If they take photographs of the vehicle, especially if it has a broken taillight like that, why wouldn't they have photographed it? A lot of towing companies, that's their SOP, standard operating procedure, where they're covering their legal liability by having photographs of the vehicles that they're towing. Because think about it, they're towing vehicles that oftentimes do have body damage, and they don't want to be accused of it. All right, so moving on to, oops, I jumped ahead to slide 3, sorry. Multiple injuries suggest a fall. Or a beating. So that's what we have for the injuries. These injuries are not consistent with a motor vehicle strike. And if you don't have them consistent with a motor vehicle strike, it's reasonable doubt, not guilty. That does it right there. All right, so next we have 32. Glass fragments at the scene had no ties to Lexus taillight damage. It was polycarb. So what is it with these supposed pieces of glass they found there? It had nothing to do with the SUV of Karen, and the glass pieces would not have busted out that polycarb. So why they were there, how they got there, could they also been planted to make it look like something was there that maybe there's some kind of fight, and he was holding that in his hand when he supposedly was struck by the vehicle. So it doesn't add up to making any sense. And since we know Karen wasn't there at the 12:45 time frame that the prosecution said that John was struck, then it's really just more issues of reasonable doubt, and not it's not incriminating towards Karen whatsoever. Okay, you're saying you had heard the tow truck driver was told by police not to take any photos. It would be interesting to see if that's true. Yeah, I can't imagine not taking photos and being told by the police that, but who knows? Anything's possible in this case. All right, number 33, we have no tire impressions or paint traces tying Karen's SUV to the body. So I know on Court TV, Vinnie Politan says that Karen's accused of running over Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Let me clarify. She was never accused of running over John's body. That would imply that the wheels of the SUV, that this 6,000 plus pound SUV she's driving, actually drove over John, and the vehicle, the weight of the vehicle on top of his body killed him. So that's completely false. It's not accurate. So just keep in mind these kind of there's nothing that suggests that this SUV was tied to John O'Keefe's body. There's no paint. There's no paint type of residue on John's clothing that he's wearing. So there's really nothing to forensically tie her vehicle to John's body that's credible. Okay, retired officer, you're saying in all hit and runs, you always took pictures. The fact there's a fatality makes it much more important. Absolutely. I mean, that you want to get those photos right away, especially if they go, hey, we know who did it. It's Karen Reed. It's the car is located at such and such location. They'd rush over there. They want to take photos and start processing it. But no, they don't even take photos. So it's like they intentionally botched it for a reason, because think about it, if they would have had photos, then that locks them in to what it looks like at the time. And that even would further show that this story that they have of how Karen supposedly hit and struck John O'Keefe is just incredulous. But what they don't really realize is that the fact that they had more damage done later on to that taillight, that actually helps prove what the defense is saying, that something else is going on behind the scenes. And that wouldn't be happening unless they knew Karen Reed was innocent of this. Kate says they should have checked to see if the glass was some of her glasses in the house. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. But they never did that because they didn't want to go down that road. Yes, another good point, officer. You're saying then they followed the truck to the Sally Port in a private pickup. We would have never done that. I understand they're saying that they did it because it was snowy conditions and they had better SUV four-wheel drive than what they had in their law enforcement vehicle. But I just don't buy it. And all that hanging around at the Sally Port there of Canton Police Department done by Higgins, that's extremely, extremely suspicious behavior. Yeah, Trailgazer, no crime scene tape. Law enforcement going by weeks later, picking up evidence in the street far down from the Albert house. Yeah, so that's going to be mentioned up here in one of these next ones here, which is number 34. 5 undocumented searches going back to 34 Fairview that resulted in additional taillight pieces being tagged as evidence. So we heard something about in the court the other day where They didn't even document it in the police report for the activity of the investigating officer, and that would be Trooper Proctor. So there's nothing disclosing he's going back to the so-called crime scene. They're on the side of the street, so at 34 Fairview. So this is a huge, huge issue. I mean, this is like something the defense should like really, really bring out as a massive sign of a cover up, and it looks like there's evidence planning going on. So why wouldn't you put that in your report? He had to log it in every time he went there and he got something. So at least did that. So he's busted that way. But why wouldn't it be in the rest of the report? So I think the more you dig, the more you'll find there's something shady going on. And the only reason shady stuff's going on is because they know they don't have the evidence they need against Karen Reed. Okay, next we have 35. 2 swabs from John O'Keefe's shirt returned pig DNA. Was that maybe dog treats? Supposedly they don't have dog DNA on his arm. So I think that whole thing, like saying, I don't trust the lab. I don't trust anything going on. Could it be the dog treats that has some pig DNA on there? That could very well be the case. Could it be some kind of food John ate or something like that? I doubt it. I think the most likely thing is it came from some kind of dog treat that the dog had been chewing on. Otherwise, how would you get dog DNA on you? I mean, hog DNA on you. I just don't get that one. But again, that's another indicator that something is foul. The prosecution can't prove it. So all these kind of questions you have that we don't know the answer to, those kind of doubts you have to hold as a juror against the prosecution. It's not the defense to answer these questions and come up with the proper explanation for how they happen. If you don't have a proper explanation of how it happened, then guess what? That's something that the prosecution has failed to meet their burden of proof on. So that is something that rises to reasonable doubt. Miriam Komuji, you're asking the officer from North Carolina, if Karen Reed's SUV had backed up 60 feet at 24 miles an hour with all the other vehicles parked there in the street, would you expect his marks and damage to other vehicles? Well, I think that obviously there was other snow there, and but going that fast, if and we're going to get to that whether the vehicle actually go that fast, but I think that you're talking about a vehicle out of control. That is very fast. Any of you that have cars, drive your car 24 miles an hour in reverse. Don't do it when there's bad conditions out, and make sure there's nobody behind you, obviously, to include cars. But if you do that in a big open area, you have somebody stand outside your vehicle and seeing what it'd be like if somebody's in the position of John O'Keefe, but standing far enough back that you don't run the risk of hurting somebody, then you're going to see how ridiculous it would be for somebody to be able to go that fast in reverse and not be totally out of control and spin and crash. You have absolutely zero control of where the vehicle is going to go. So, and you would hear a vehicle going back that fast. So it's again, just this whole thing about 24 miles an hour. I think it's all just botched police investigation because they need to put a spin on stuff to make stuff try to stick. All right, here's one that I had the alibi heading on a recent live stream. This is such a huge thing because this is basically her alibi. Karen's has a 1236 Wi-Fi connection with her phone to John O'Keefe's house. That proves her alibi. The state alleged that in the trial that it was in trial number 1, the strike occurred at 12:45 until they come to the very end of the closing. They sort of snuck some slides in there that talked about vaguely made it alluded to maybe a 12:30ish type of strike. So if you look at all the timeline proves that Karen was not there, and what these other witnesses are saying is going on. If John O'Keefe was in that driveway, like the state's saying, all these people would have been seeing it, and they were rushed out there right away. He'd have been seen and maybe had a chance to survive. So the forensic evidence of that Wi-Fi connection is huge. I would say that's one of the top 3 indicators for reasonable doubt. It's more than just an indicator. I'd say it's an actual it's actual proof that she wasn't there at that time. So it's more than just an indicator, it's actual proof. So unless somebody can say digitally the Wi-Fi connection thing was timed wrong or something like that, that is like a golden nugget that's going to help set her free. Septic Hank, you're saying every single opportunity to see your taillight on any footage, ring, camera, library, Sally port is missing, minutes, tampered with, missing, and they refuse metadata. That's a great way to sum it up. That is huge. What do they got to hide? Why aren't they disclosing that kind of information? Why can't they find the information? It does look, I mean, that is the kind of stuff you see if there's a cover up. So this is, that pretty much helps exonerate her right there. LE is saying, I was worried some serious upper state management is in on this corruption. I think John O'Keefe's investigation broke more policy and procedures than they followed with no fear and hardly any repercussions. It wasn't for that. Think about it. If it wasn't for that, the FBI looking into an investigation of the investigators on this case, we would not have had their personal cell phone data to include their text messages. So Trooper Proctor would be testifying up there, and you would have none of, imagine if you had none of these texts describing what he was really thinking and doing on this case. So that's something that's very much a huge benefit for the defense. And yeah, how high up any kind of corruption goes, who knows? But anybody who testifies, like I say, they're going to have pretty much zero credibility with the jury for these law enforcement types. They're just not credible. They botched too many things, and there's going to be a retired FBI agent that describes that for the defense. I'm trying to, my mouse isn't working here, sorry. So I'm trying to go for it, and question's not letting me. Jeannie Trioli, you're saying Boston and corruption go way, way back. Yeah, it does. It's really deeply embedded in the kind of culture there. Maya Rodriguez Sorensen and Esquire is saying it's such a scary thought that if the FBI hasn't investigated this, same with Sandra Birchmore, her murderer would still be a cop. Yes. So think about it. If a cop can get away with killing somebody and the local police help cover it up and call it a suicide, then why would it be not even easier just to pin it on Karen wrongfully? Linda Mon is saying, what happens after Karen Reed is freed? Will somebody get charged for the John O'Keefe murder? You know, I'm not going to think that far down the road. Eventually, this may come unraveled, and folks that weren't telling the truth may have something happen to them where they feel compelled to tell the truth to save their neck. But short of them having to save their neck, they already got all of the local law enforcement and prosecution in their back pocket. So why would they roll over? Think about it. The prosecution is trying to make all these people that have these wild stories, they can't hold up to scrutiny and cross-examination, all these supposed butt dials and deleted text messages, they're just outright not telling you the truth on. And these are the kind of witnesses that the prosecution is trying to have brought up as credible for the jury. There's zero credibility these folks have with any jury. So all right, moving on here to the next one. $37, no evidence of a high-speed impact with the SUV. So where is this high-speed impact? It was really going 24 miles an hour, which I submit that's all wrong by Trooper Paul. It was probably the wheels spinning when the vehicle was being hauled away by the tow truck, and you saw the vehicle spinning tires trying to get up there because it's very slick out. So him trying to do timestamps and the key data and all that kind of stuff, I just don't believe any of it, and neither should a jury. This thing is just drowning in incompetence and hiding the ball. Thomas T, you're saying, I think they destroyed the evidence. I mean, anything's possible. I mean, that's what they try to do, bury the evidence on the Sarah Birchmore case. Again, we have a retired officer saying the injuries are not consistent with a motor vehicle crash. No way whatsoever. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Something else killed John O'Keefe, gave him those injuries. It wasn't Karen's car. Karen wasn't even there at the time. So what happened? Prosecution, that's your duty. You failed. You cannot prove it. You're stuck with your story now. You can try to add more witnesses, try to add more extras, try to put some spin on it. Bottom line is, it's not going to happen because the truth is not on your side. When the truth is not on your side, you should lose. There's good enough lawyers on this case that they will expose it for what it is. F.R. Smith, exculpatory Sally Port video evidence was definitely destroyed. There's some more stuff that came out supposedly that someone sent me a YouTube link on, where it's supposedly Higgins messing around with the tail light. I don't know if that's true or not. It's sort of grainy on the version I received. So anybody know anything about that? Buttercup 203 saying, I love the 100 reasons for reasonable doubt, but the jury has to know what it means. Yeah, they need to describe that, and I hope they can describe what it means in the jury selection as well, and really do some deep dive questioning of that. But I think the judge is only going to allow certain limited follow up to the generalized questions that are going to be scripted out. Jammin is saying it makes me wonder how many other people they have railroaded. Yeah, certainly. Here we have the officer saying it should never have been sent to the Sally Port, talking about the vehicle of Karen. Kent PD was recused. I think though they recused themselves the next morning, sometime. Well, was it? No, maybe it was. I'm trying to think of the timeline of that. Yeah, that'd be interesting. The timeline. When was it decided that Canton Police Department would be recused, and when was the vehicle picked up? So yeah, but that's what this video is supposedly made out, saying that they both were back there, not just Proctor, but Higgins was back there too. And it's like a later second. I don't know. I don't know if it's even an accurate video or somebody's just making stuff up. But suppose I've been hearing there's more videos, Sally Port videos that we've not seen. Jim Grow, you're saying the jury discounted basically all the defense witnesses, but these jurors could be completely different for 2.0. Again, I think that we're getting it from this one guy, Ronnie. I don't think Ronnie really can speak for the other jurors that accurately to say that they didn't look at any of the defense efforts to discredit the prosecution witnesses. I don't know that really came down to that, like he's saying, and I think it was more the fact that you had this handpicked foreman that was a former law enforcement officer. And so I think he was able to work the room that way. That's why I really think it came down to. So Yeah, Kate, you're saying you saw a video way back when numerous people gathered around the tail light of the Sally Port. A female as well. Can't remember which channel. So we'll see if that comes out at trial. All right, next we have 38. Trooper Paul's testimony was based entirely on secondhand information. He never saw where John O'Keefe's body was located. This is really huge. And I wish the defense would have brought this out more in their cross-examination. So he was basically fed information because he wasn't there. He wasn't there to collect the information. He wasn't there to see the information. He's just getting all this stuff, which is really true hearsay from other witnesses that are working the case, witnesses that are law enforcement types. And when you have that kind of information being fed to you, it's not reliable, especially if there's some kind of cover-up thing going on here. So he cannot testify as any kind of firsthand knowledge of any of this. It's all just basically what he was told. And think about it, when he showed up, there was that lieutenant that told him what had happened, that Karen Reed's vehicle had struck John O'Keefe. And that's pretty much was all they had for follow-up to that. There's no other suspects. There was no other information that they thought they need to pursue. And suspects. There's no other suspects. It was just Karen, open and shut case. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work. And they should have to pay dearly for that at trial. Karen should have never been charged. But this is, they're trying to prop this up as a credible case. And they cannot, they actually know deep down this case is an absolute joke of a case, to put it nicely. Okay, Christine, you're saying Higgins, Berkowitz, and Wanless are seen on the video along with Yuri and Proctor. Yeah, I don't know if I saw a good enough video to describe that accurately. Wouldn't that be something if that was the case, though? Teddy T, you're saying I think they picked the most gullible trooper to do the accident reconstruction. Well, there's not many of them around, and it's not a job many officers want to have. I'll tell you that. Yeah, what did he say? As RN saying, trooper, that the scene spoke to me. Yeah, that was something. He was so nervous. Think about how nervous he was. And he was nervous that trial. Think how nervous he'll be this trial. Yeah, that's true. Like normally, what do you have when you find a body somewhere? You have stakes in the ground or an outline, a painted outline showing where the body was, all that kind of stuff. You don't have any of that kind of stuff in this case. They didn't take it seriously. F.R. Smith, you're saying you actually feel sorry for Trooper Paul. Yeah, actually, I sort of did too. He was a useful patsy for smarter, more ruthless members of his force, and he was a good team player, officer. And Proctor wanted something to be true. So anyway, I think he felt really bad about what he was saying, but he was put up to it. He was told this is what happened, and he had to come up with the best kind of explanation for how it happened. And nobody could come up with a credible explanation that would fit the story that Karen Reed in her vehicle, or the reason that John O'Keefe is dead. Buttercup 203, you're saying jury looks to the judge for guidance during the trial, but with her size and bad attitude towards defendant, it seems unfair. Yes, it does. I've talked about that. She is so much coming across like the defense should not be trusted. Don't listen to them, and the prosecution should be trusted, and they know what the truth is and are talking it. So yeah, it's very, very much a sad thing to see. Hopefully it's going to get better this next go round. Hopefully all the social media coverage on the lack of fair trial that Karen got in the first trial are going to make it a little bit easier this next round. But I do think that it's going to be a whole different uphill battle for the defense with this new prosecutor on, who's going to do anything and everything that he can to put a spin on this case. Yeah, somebody's saying it's not Trooper Proctor, it's Michael Proctor. Yeah, because he got fired. All right, next one we have is Trooper Paul's description of a 30-foot launch from an armed strike on John O'Keefe defies physics and is total speculation. So him saying that John would have launched 30 feet, how does he know 30 feet? Where's he coming up with that? How does he know where the vehicle would have hit John O'Keefe? He wasn't there. There's nothing they had from vehicle measurements. There's no tire marks. It's all just what he was told. By what kind of reliable people? Were the people that telling him that? Was this lieutenant that told him that Karen's striking of John O'Keefe with her vehicles or the cause of death? Did he know firsthand where the body was found? Did he know where the vehicle was at? None of this. It's all just wild guesses. James Lynch, yes, it strains credibility here of these witnesses. This is unbelievable. Island girl, you're saying if it was she reversed 62 feet, it would be by the mailbox. Yeah. And think about it. When the vehicle supposedly was, of Karen's vehicle was supposedly way past the flagpole and the location where John O'Keefe's body was allegedly found, then she was long gone at the time that Jen McCabe said that she was there, back going way forward like that. So Jen McCabe came up with her own timeline. They're all talking about it, and her timeline actually blows up in the government's face because it actually proves Karen was not a part of the death of John O'Keefe. Leslie, you're saying, imagine being a juror from Canton getting stared down by Brian Alberts. You're saying Brian Mick Alberts. Yeah, the way he was in there and he was sitting sort of behind Karen, as I recall, and doing that stare down. If I was a defense counsel, I would object to that. I would not let the officer stay in their room, especially having that kind of being sitting right, sort of like in viewpoint of the jury's looking at Karen, then they got to look at him. What I think is also bad is that the brother of John O'Keefe, he's sitting there doing that mean stare down of Karen throughout the whole trial. And I think the jury, when they look at Karen, they right away see him off to the right. I think that's also a bad thing. I'd be objecting if I was defense counsel. Sure, let him stay there, but he should not be like right in viewpoint. I think he's intentionally trying to be in viewpoint. He's not sitting with his parents. I think he's always trying to have the jury, when they look at Kieran, they're automatically going to see him in his angry face. So I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's giving a fair shake to Karen by that happening. Tanya Dorling, you're asking, would I allow the witness to look at their previous statements as you question them? Yeah, if they don't recall something they testified to previously, then obviously you can ask them if there's something that help refresh their testimony from whichever version of testimony they gave, whether it be a interview or a deposition or grand jury testimony. But the other thing I'd be doing is, especially if they have a lawyer in the room there helping coach them, is talk about the conversation they had with their lawyer and why aren't they prepared when they have a lawyer that they're paying to prepare them. I agree with Alan Jackson's Bucket of Nails, who says Karen did not reverse the 64 feet period. I don't believe that. No way. Amber C., you're saying defense has filed a motion for them not to be allowed in the courtroom during closing statements this time, but Bev hasn't ruled on it yet. Yeah, let's see where she does line up on this. I think she's only ruled in favor of the defense for things that she had to. She had to rule in favor of the defense on this issue about getting attorney-client privileged texts and emails. Otherwise, it would have like derailed the whole case for another year and a half or so because they would have had to Karen would have had to get new counsel. Cass, you're saying if Karen didn't crack her taillight on John's truck, they were going to pin it on Lucky, this plow driver. That is a very interesting concept, and I think that needs to be explored further. Moram, you're saying 34 Fairview Road is on a curve. Karen is tiny, not a Formula One driver. There's no way what the state is claiming happened. She would have tore up the whole front yard because of the curve. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way that happened. It's not making any sense. And if it doesn't make any sense, it's going to lead to reasonable doubt for the jury. Okay, I'm trying to see here. Did our North Carolina officer have a comment about Trooper Paul's credibility? I cannot move my mouse, so can't scroll back up for some reason. Yeah, if Karen, I can't pull your comment up, but if Karen was driving backwards that fast, John could have heard it and gotten out of the way. But she wasn't there, so we know it never happened. All right, going on to the next one then. Number 40. This is something that I got from someone that apparently knows a lot about vehicles. They say that this Lexus safety feature has a safety, a traction control device on that vehicle that prevents it from going in reverse that fast when the road conditions are slick. Because if you gun it and you're going that fast, it's not going to allow you to go that fast because the vehicle senses you're about to lose control. So don't know if that's accurate or not, but want to include that because, like I say, AI had some of these data points in here on doubts that I didn't find were credible. So that's why I substituted this. So if anybody has any additional expertise on that, or North Carolina Trooper, maybe you have some experience with this kind of thing on data for vehicles. I do recall a couple of years ago, somebody tell me like from 2016 on, the amount of data that vehicles save on them is like really, really, really super detailed that you would not believe. They can really pretty much find out what happened in an accident and stuff like that. But I just don't believe anything like I say that Trooper Paul would say. So unless there's some kind of independent defense type expert that could talk about that, I don't believe any of that's credible that Trooper Paul talked about. Okay, great. Now I can see it. Officer, you're saying you don't believe anything Trooper Paul says. Yeah. So based on we're both in law enforcement profession and the criminal law profession for many years. And so I think anybody that has our similar kind of experience is going to say the same thing. You can't believe what he says. I think he's put up to doing his testimony and coming up with his story because they can't find another expert to talk about this. He got suckered into this thing, and that's why he feels so nervous about it. And that's why he says that the crime scene spoke to him because the forensic evidence didn't. He felt that pressure. And think about it. If he would have not supported what the theory was of Karen causing this death of John O'Keefe, he would be he'll be put out the door. They'll find a way to get rid of him. So his job's on the line. If he doesn't line up with what the Canton Police Department and these other law enforcement types are saying, his job's on the line. All right, they're trying to. Here we go. Now I can scroll up. RN is saying Alexis won't allow you to reverse up 24 miles an hour in just 60 feet because it's electronic control transmission, traction control, and safety systems, VSC and PCS. VSC, I know that's some kind of light on there. I would say, as I mentioned on a live stream a couple times ago, we actually have a Lexus, and we actually did a test of going to like 24 miles an hour, and it can do that. I just think the traction control device is what prevents you in a slick conditions, snowy conditions, preventing you from doing that. That's what I understood the question to be. So, if it's dry pavement, like we were doing a test on, then I would say that's not going to be accurate. This statement's not accurate. But if it's slick out, then that could be different. So nobody tried this unless you're in a big parking lot and there's no other vehicles around. But yeah, your vehicle could totally lose control, spin out of control if it does not have this kind of traction control thing on. So if anybody else has a Lexus, they want to try that up in the snow area. But I don't know how much snow we're going to get here in the States. Maybe in Colorado or something, where they can get snow like 9 months out of the year off and on. Right, you're saying it's designed to limit the reverse gear acceleration and speed to ensure the driver's safety, protect pedestrians and objects behind the vehicle, and present undue stress on driving components as well. That's what the speedometer said when Leslie and I were checking it out. So I can't. And it seemed like I was going that fast. It wasn't like the speedometer, I think, was off because it's going in reverse so fast. Okay, you're saying that straight from Lexus literature. So I don't. Anyway. Maybe that's just kicks in, like say, during slick conditions. I don't know if it tells you that or not. So you're saying the jury possibly won't know who the reconstructionists were hired by. I think they will know at this time. I think that you're just going to try to get the prosecutors trying to rake them over the coals and make them out to be some kind of biased, shady type characters, which they're not. I don't think he's going to get any mileage of that. But anyway. Sandy, you're saying, how does the prosecution get away with it by saying all this stuff without proof? Well, that's what they're doing. They're just saying stuff like we've seen the prosecutor say, there's no evidence of this, there's no evidence of this, and that, and the other thing. And it just doesn't sound, it's not accurate because there is evidence of it, right? There's evidence of it because you have like the ARCA witness and stuff like that. Then he's going to call the ARCA witnesses biased. It's really far out there. It's really radical type advocacy, and defense needs to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable for that, because it's very, very much a scary thing when you have a prosecutor that playing that fast and loose with the facts. It is a very, very scary proposition. Very, very disturbing to see that. Yeah, and then when you let the judge letting that kind of stuff in. And that's the thing I do as a defense counsel. Every time he said there's no evidence, I don't know if I could bite my tongue, even if there's not a jury there. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I've ever had a prosecutor that outlandish saying stuff. There's no evidence of this, no evidence of that. I probably would just stand up and say, Your Honor, he's misleading the court. There is evidence, and then describe the evidence. You're not supposed to do that to interrupt a counsel in their argument, but when they're citing blatantly false facts like that, I would probably do that. Okay, pre-collision system with rear cross-traffic braking and parking support brake. These actually intervene if the system detects an obstacle or potential collision while reversing. Yeah, that's interesting. That's something that defense really needs to hone in on then. If there's that kind of devices, and think about it, this is like a 2022 Lexus, top line Lexus. It's their biggest SUV they make. It's going to have every kind of new tech, safety tech feature out there. And so, yeah, could it even do that? That's a great point. So would there be some kind of like would it had a rear with a rear camera seeing that they're about to strike someone, would it automatically make the car start braking and stuff like that? And what's kind of distance would cause that automatic braking to happen? So if you have a collision avoidance system, then and that also can occur while your vehicle's backing up. That'd be interesting to see. It'd be sort of like the My Cousin Vinny movie where you had the two guys charged with the murder of the store clerk, and Joe Pesci was defending them, and basically he had his girlfriend, who was a vehicle expert, testify that the traction control on the car that took off after the murder of the clerk was not, and it had both wheels spinning, was not the same kind of car that the two folks on trial for murder were driving, and that was his single traction, and so they would not have both wheels spinning out. So in any event, that's sort of like the same kind of defense, I guess. That's pretty interesting. Miriam, you're saying the feds honestly need to be looking at the RICO charges for the Norfolk County DAs and some of the prosecutors and assigned Massachusetts State Police, Birchmore, Reed. Kearney cases were all and are manufactured in a fraud. I think some of that stuff with that Kearney case, I think that's they're really stretching in their charges. So I don't like Karen hanging around the guy. I don't think that's going to benefit her. And whatever kind of text messages they got, that could be hurtful to her case. Obviously, the prosecutor is doing everything he can to try to get those in any which way he can. And anyway, he's trying to get what I see it as, he's trying to get some kind of message that Karen put out there, either through the public media or through text messages to Turtle Boy or somebody else. He's wanting to get those text messages. And he even tried to get them through the attorney, which the judge finally shot down. But he needs to get that. Why? Because he knows the forensic data does not support his theory of the case. The forensic data absolutely will prove that Karen was not involved in this death of Officer John O'Keefe. So that's what the prosecution is so worried about. And he should be. He absolutely should be, because he knows that the defense is going to crush him on this. So unless he can spin the facts, unless he can make it look like nothing the defense says is truthful, everything what his witnesses say is the truth, just look the other way, don't use your common sense. And unless you can trick the jury like that, I mean, this is going to be a zero chance of prosecution get a conviction. The worst it's going to be for the defense is that they're going to get a hung jury, but there's no way the prosecution can prove this case and get Karen convicted with this kind of information out there. Yeah, this is a good point here by Charmaine Lilly. If he's so sure of his case, why does he need to go through backdoor to get messages? Yeah, trying to get attorney-client messages and all that. Sandy, you're saying Brendan is so busy defending against the defense because he has no case to prosecute. Well, I also think he's trying to hide the ball from the defense. That's what he's trying to do, suppress the evidence from the jury so they can't see what really is going on. And that's why I make the comment that the only way he has a shot at winning this case is by keeping out the truth. And that's a really sad thing when the prosecutor's role is to pursue justice, not just get convictions. Here we have officers saying a vehicle is backing up in snow with spinning wheels. The speedometer likely showing inaccurate or zero speed reading. Depending on which tires, I guess the speedometer is tracking to. That's true. I've not looked into the Richard Allen Delphi case. I'm hearing a lot about that lady, that case a lot. That's a question from Danielle X. Yeah, well, it's only midnight here in New York City, so we're not up that late. All right, you're saying the Delphi case will break your heart. Here from the officer, speedometers measure speed by detecting the rotational speed of the wheels or part of the drivetrain that rotates at a constant ratio to the wheels. Yeah, this sounds accurate here, where the officer is saying when wheels spin in snow, they're not moving the vehicle forward or backward in a controlled manner. Instead, the tires are slipping on the snow. The vehicles are not rotating at a consistent rate. Yeah, it's sort of like it's not an even spin. And they can spin really fast and then get caught in something, or they just continually spin freely. So I recall there was some spinning of the wheels of Kieran's car when they did get it loaded up on that tow truck. Okay, so let me go in here. It's after midnight here on Eastern time. So I'm going to do maybe one more question. We'll call it a night. Mr. Montana, you're asking, have I seen the new federal letter that overlaps into Kieran's case also? I have not seen that. So I will look at that and we can comment on that in the future. All right, Buttercup, you're saying if I was part of the defense team for Kieran Reed, what would you close with differently? I guess you're saying. I think you know how to nail the timeline and the digital evidence and the forensic evidence, including the medical evidence, does not comport with anything the prosecution's saying. In fact, it helps clear Kieran Reed, and you need to go into the timelines more. And covering the reasonable doubt is I think a better way to go about it than trying to say who actually did it in their opinion. And I think show all the different inconsistencies of prosecution witnesses, and then say what do they got to hide. If they really had nothing to hide, they're just there and they're all in the house. Why would they be so worried about getting their story straight? Saying don't mention that John's in the house in the text that Matt McCabe sent. Why would they be doing all this concern about Carrie saying everything as Jen McCabe texted, telling them everything? And why would she be worried about Carrie talking too much? So this kind of stuff just doesn't add up. And so it all adds up, though, to reasonable doubt. So PJ, you said that the defense needs to test the hair with their own specialists. Yeah, that'd be a good thing. Well, even do a vehicle test, see if hair can stay on a vehicle in kind of in road conditions, let alone cold, snowy, wet conditions. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for everyone's support, and we'll be back. We'll be covering the rest of the numbers that are 41 to 60 next go round. So not sure if we'll do that tomorrow night or not, but thanks for your focus on the justice matters for this case, and we'll see you again down the road here soon. Thank you. Have a good night and a safe weekend.